it's not like a scientific research paper, but it does approach this topic from a slightly more statistical background, where we're evaluating many different aspects of this topic that will contribute to our conclusion of what is going on in China regarding organ harvesting. And so, can everyone see the slide change? Yes. Okay. Yeah. And feel free to interrupt me if, seems like something is not right, or, something doesn't seem to be changing when it should be. So I will get started. So a little bit of background on organ harvesting in China. It's been going on since, or organ transplantation in China has been happening since about the 60s or 70s. That's when it first came around, the technology first developed. However, this wasn't really like it wasn't really like how you would believe organ transplantation would be like in, the US, for example. It was almost always accompanied by, political abuses, frequently used for political retribution. For example, Li Lian was an 18-year-old member of the Red Guard. And basically, this person made some comments critical to one of the party officials and was executed. And then her organs were harvested on the spot at the execution site, and were given to the son of one of the commanding officials at the time. So things like this were happening since like the start of organ transplantation in China. And up until 2000, this industry experienced steady growth, which is usually pretty expected. However, mostly because of medical advancements and also because of the anti-cram campaign. And this is because most of the organ sources in China at the time for organ transplantation came from death row prisoners. This, as most of you probably know, is not the case, at least in the US and many Western countries. This is frowned upon typically because you have to be a donor in order to donate your organs. And so China has been using death row prisoners this entire time to justify, making use, I guess, of these bodies. And the introduction of medicines such as like cyclosporin A were immunosuppressants that helped basically increase the success rate of organ transplants. And so because of the anti-cram campaign, many more people were executed due to this harsher crackdown on anything that the party believed to, not follow their goals. So things that happen, such as the Cultural Revolution, and just like any everyday like intellectuals were persecuted, and some were executed just simply for, believing what they did. And so, let me see. Okay. And so starting in the year 2000, China's organ transplant industry experienced a very different change. It started to grow much, much faster. The strange thing is that starting in 2000, the death row count every year in China also started to go down. And so this raises the question of where are these organs coming from? And a lot of people think, China's got a huge population. There's probably tons of accidents every day that make, the perfect opportunity for like someone to donate their organs. However, in China, China did not have a proper organ donation system until like about a decade ago. And but also culturally in China, most people do not believe in organ donation, since many people are religious, or else at least hold traditional beliefs that are based off religions which believe that you should keep your body intact after death. So it's starting to become a big question, where are all these organs coming from if, you're getting thousands of organ transplants done every year? So a couple statistics that were done in the early 2000s that from people who researched this independently. An interesting thing in China is that you have very short waiting times for any organ, pretty much a kidney, a liver. It's usually guaranteed to find a match within 24 to 40 hours to within a week. And you can also just fly into China and get the organ transplant done within that time frame as soon as you find a match. And this is very unusual because in the United States and many other countries, you got to wait several years typically to get like a match. You have to have a matching tissue type, a matching blood type, and you just need to be on the top list and have all these factors line up. And you can also schedule transplants in advance in China. So there have been multiple documented cases of people scheduling transplants weeks ahead of time, even going to China on the spot and asking to get a transplant, and same day, within 3 days, within a week, getting a transplant done. And I don't have it written here on the slide, but there's also been cases where people have called hospitals in China, and they've inquired about like how the transplant success rates are, and hospitals have also told patients that if one pair of kidneys or whatever organ you're transplanting is not successful, they will guarantee a replacement or keep on replacing that organ until you get a successful one. And so this is really interesting because that means you can go to China and go there for a kidney transplant. And this is actually a documented case where someone went and got 9 different kidney transplants, and the last one was successful. However, the survival rate wasn't very high, and this person only lived for about another year. So China, at this rate, from what I've given you, has what seems to be a really, really big bank of ready to go, organs on demand just to transplant to people. So this basically means that China can not only guarantee a donor's death for you to get that organ transplanted, but they can also guarantee the time that this donor dies for you. So this is very suspicious. So back also in the early 2000s, people were doing research about this, and China was also advertising their organ transplant industry. And at one point, one of their websites on a hospital said that had a diagram kind of like this. Hope everybody can see, where it basically had like a price chart for all the different organs on your body. So it was basically like a literal market. You could just, ask for an organ, and they would give you an upfront price estimate for what you would be paying for. And just to keep in mind, at this time when China was advertising itself like this, they still did not have a formal organ donation system. So back in 2003 and 2006, people were researching, and people started posting and like publishing information on the statistics of organ transplantation in China. And a lot of these numbers are very suspicious. And following some of these publications gaining traction, many Chinese registries and like websites started to go down, and many of them became inaccessible afterwards, or you had to be had like a password and a login key to be able to see the data. Prior to these research publications, many of the statistics were publicly accessible and even flaunted to promote their organ transplantations in China, and also try to get more customers. And so one of these was David Kilgore and David Matus, 2 Canadians. And so they were able to do a lot of research and gathered it in a book called Bloody Harvest. And a lot of this data they got from the China Liver Transplant Registry in Hong Kong. And after this book's publication, this registry was shut down, and access was only available to those who were issued credentials with a login and a password. So this is one example of the cover-up of data. And another interesting thing, so previously someone had done research on this topic as well, and it was published in the BMC Medical Ethics, which is a journal related to medical ethics, on the data for the Chinese donor registry. And what you see here is a graph. And so the points, the circles, stars, and the squares is the data that China spat out every year. They told everybody, this is the number of donors we have, this is the number of kidney transplants we did, and this is the number of liver transplants that we did. And that line that you see that is plotted is a function, a very simple mathematical function that was generated by a computer. And you can see these lines and these points line up very, very well. And in fact, it's like almost perfect. It's almost perfectly smooth. If for those of you who want a little bit more on like the mathy side of this, there's an R squared value, which is basically the mean difference of like how far a function is from like the actual data points. And so something very, very close to 1 means perfect, 0 means like completely way off, and it's just random data. The R squared value for these functions is for every single function is above 0.999, which is very high. Apologies, my laptop says it's running out of battery. I did not realize this. All right. So another point for this is that the data that was being reported by China was very suspicious, given that their donors and kidney transplants and liver transplants grew at a quadratic rate, almost perfect to one that would fit an equation. And so, as I stated earlier, China's traditions require that people don't donate their organs after death. And to back this up, between 2003 and 2009, only 130 citizens across the entire country successfully donated their organs. So this is much, much lower than what people researched and were able to estimate, just based off hospital reports and what was kept in registries. Ethan Gutman, another researcher in 2016, published a report where he estimated that about 60 to 100,000 transplants were being performed annually in China. And 90% of these were coming from Falun Gong practitioners, which is a traditional practice that is practiced in China, and 10% from Christians, Tibetans, and Uyghurs. And this is based off of data analysis, but also just from straight up calling the hospitals in China. People asked the hospitals, hey, I heard there's this group called Falun Gong, they meditate, they don't drink, they don't smoke, and they have healthy bodies. And the hospitals, many were saying, we are guaranteed to have organs from Falun Gong. And in fact, you can choose. They're all under 40, healthy, and all available for donation. So some evidence of Falun Gong as a source comes directly from the family members or people who were practiced Falun Gong and were detained and managed to escape, or they were released later on. And many of these practitioners report to being subject to blood tests and medical examinations, which the rest of the general prison population was not administered. And they were never told of their test results. And there are also many cases of young, healthy Falun Gong detainees dying in custody, and their bodies are cremated, so you can't see what actually happened to their body or any remnants of to show like what was the cause of death. And for the families who did manage to see the detainees whose bodies were not cremated, many of them had scars which matched where you would make incisions for organ removal. And there's also evidence recently as Uyghurs being an organ source. So many of you probably already know that Xinjiang, China's province that is like primarily composed of the Uyghur ethnic group, has a very heavy surveillance. And many of these Uyghurs have also been detained, and they have experienced similar things that Falun Gong practitioners have, including blood tests, urine tests, and physical examinations where they weren't told the results. And also many of these examinations coincide with ones that you need to determine organ health. So all of this sounds really bad, and so you might be wondering, what are we going to do about it, given we have evidence that almost like guarantees the fact that China is definitely harvesting organs from prisoners of conscience or death row prisoners. And many countries have already issued or created laws to respond to this. So Israel has a law where insurance will not cover organ transplant in China. Italy and Taiwan both have laws against the organ tourism brokers, the people who introduce patients to organ transplantation in China. And Spain has a law where it basically treats organ transplantation as a crime where you like kill someone, since if you go to China and get a transplant, you most likely killed an innocent person who is not in fact a donor and was simply being held as a prisoner of conscience. And the United States in 2016 passed House Resolution 343 condemning forced organ harvesting in China, but there is no official law yet in the US that has like an actual punishment for this. And you can find out more about this on stoporganharvesting.org. And Texas passed a Senate and House concurrent resolution condemning forced organ harvesting as well in China. And many other states have also done this, but not like all the states together. Unfortunately, it's been difficult getting some states to do this. Some of them, it's simply that there aren't enough people doing the work for this, and others are a little bit more strange. So California had something similar like this going on a few years ago, but the Chinese the Chinese consulate called everyone in the California Senate saying not to pass this resolution. And Kevin DeLeon at the time just took the, answered this and said no, just because the Chinese consulate had told him not to. And there have been many other state-level resolutions against forced organ harvesting in China listed here. And these have been all coming up in the past 10 years. And so we're hoping that in the future, more people are going to, raise awareness about this, and fewer people will go to China for organ transplants, knowing how they're sourced and knowing what happens typically if you do get an organ transplantation in China. And I'm hoping I was able to share some knowledgeable information with you, and hopefully let everybody here understand why people have concluded that organ transplantation in China is coming from forced organ harvesting. And thank you so much.